clock has been slowly ticking with the passage of time. It's been months since the TBI turned its investigation file over to the District Attorney General for his review. And still there has been no explanation about the outcome of Pauline's autopsy. What did the medical pathologist see during the autopsy process? What did the forensic archaeologist discover? Was Pauline shot once, or was it twice? And if twice, as Buford claimed, what details are available about the first shot she suffered? The one where Buford said Pauline was only wounded and was gasping for breath. Did she have any defensive wounds or signs of physical abuse? What were the trajectories of the projectiles entering her head? Was it her blood on the hood of the car as well as other areas of the car's exterior, or was it Buford's blood? How does anyone explain the blood on the outside of the Plymouth Fury if neither Buford or Pauline exited the vehicle? There are these and so many other questions that people want answered. Why? Because we were told so many things that movies, social media platforms, and books got wrong. Things we were led to believe were facts about Buford's story. And what about all the other information the TBI received from witnesses that were never questioned in the original investigation? Was new evidence discovered? What are the facts, and when will we finally hear them? On February 8th of last year, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation quietly exhumed the body of Pauline Pusser, wife of former McNairy County Sheriff Buford Pusser, for an autopsy that many believe should have been performed 57 years ago. The renewed investigation was launched after a tip was reported to authorities, one that raised new questions about the true circumstances of Pauline's death on August 12, 1967. Official reports from that day claimed the couple was ambushed around 4:45 a.m., responding to a disturbance call near the infamous state line, a stretch of seedy bars, roadhouses, and a motel that had long been a hot spot for bootlegging, violence, and crime. Sheriff Buford Pusser, known for his headline-grabbing crusade against a group known as the State Line Mob and the Dixie Mafia, was wounded in the chin and was the sole survivor of the ambush while Pauline was killed. Research, however, shows there was no such crime syndicate that infested the state line as books and movies have shown, as these establishments were operated by people who actually considered themselves as competitors for business there. Yes, if you were looking for trouble, the state line would be the place where you could easily find it. However, the crime syndicate, shown in the movie Walking Tall, did not exist. The term state line mob was invented years later by author W.R. Morris for his book by the same name. Also, a review of FBI files make no references to the Dixie Mafia at the state line. This was a name coined in the late 60s by investigator Rex Armistead, who suggested that law enforcement agencies use this term to describe a band of loosely knit Southern criminals who operated in the southeastern part of the United States. However, not everyone in McNairy County believed Sheriff Pusser's version of events the morning he referred to as an ambush. In fact, doubts emerged almost immediately. People knew that the Pussers were having marital problems. Some were aware that Buford and Pauline had been separated for a while. Beyond the mysterious disturbance call, there was the unusual route they drove that morning, leaving many to wonder why an ambush party would wait for him at the location the ambush took place. Also, Buford, the alleged intended target, was shot once in the chin, while Pauline was said to have taken 2 shots to the head. According to Buford's chief deputy, Jim Moffett, Pauline had never accompanied the sheriff on such calls before. For Moffett, Pauline's presence that morning was unusual and unexplained, and some residents began to wonder if there was such a call at all, or was it a cover story? Over the years, speculation intensified, not just about whether Sheriff Pusser was the target, but whether he may have been the perpetrator.
And now we wait. Hey, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and children of all ages, to another exciting episode of Buford Pusser, The Other Story, where I, your host, will try to answer the questions asked of me today and throughout this week. You know, I get a lot of people that are contacting me by telephone, email, messenger. These people include folks that watch this channel, people from my Facebook page, news organizations, a little bit of everyone. And all of them want to know when District Attorney General Mark Davidson will release information about what was in the TBI file. Well, first of all, let me explain that all I can offer you is my humble and semi-educated opinion on these matters, as I never practiced law. So, having said that, we'll take everything, try to explain what I believe, and this is just my opinion, what I believe are in the TBI files. And it's only my guess. But being somewhat familiar with that line of work, having been a deputy sheriff here in Benton County, I can give you my thoughts on that matter. Now let's dive into this. Now first, I believe that the file is probably quite voluminous, as it contains information not only from the original investigation file, but also the information from the updated file. You know, it's my humble opinion that the files, the new ones, include information from people who were interviewed by the TBI. And the reason I say this is that many of you contacted me saying that you had indeed been interviewed and shared with me some of the information that you shared with them. And that is information that the time is right. Now, some of you had information that is firsthand. That's information that you saw or heard. While some of the information may have been shared with you by your deceased relatives, people who were afraid to come forward and give information during the original investigation simply because they feared reprisals. A lot of people were afraid of Buford Pusser, and they didn't want to speak out. They didn't know what might happen. Now, the file also probably contains information that is both statements and some physical evidence, because some of you have come forward and said that you had physical evidence that you could provide. Now, some of this might be included in the file if it was determined that the physical evidence actually tied back to the murder itself. Now, a moment ago, I mentioned information that was shared with you by deceased relatives. Now, I wouldn't expect that that would be admissible in court, because basically it's hearsay evidence. However, it could be used in a grand jury proceeding, as they have a much lower standard of evidence than a court proceeding would have, because they are simply trying to decide if there's enough evidence to possibly bring charges or indict someone. And of course, we know that's not going to happen in this case, because as far as we know at this point, everyone that might have been involved have passed away. Something else Mark Davidson will probably be considering is the evidence from the autopsy report. It should show several things. For instance, the nature of the wound, how many times that Pauline was actually shot. Was it once or twice, as Buford said? It'll give us some ideas about projectile trajectories. It will tell us if there were any defensive wounds found on her body and signs of physical abuse, which could be important. That might show that Buford and Pauline's fight or alleged fight before they left home was truly physical. And the autopsy might reveal other wounds that she had previously had, something that could play into the story. Then there's the photographic evidence. A lot of the things that we've discussed before. The blood spatter on the hood. As we've discussed, blood spatter often tells the direction of travel of the projectile. It tells the trajectory that the bullet came from. Was it something that was in Buford's physical range, or was it fired by somebody who was possibly much shorter than Buford? Lots of things to consider there. There's the blood evidence that's all over the car, such as, on the passenger's door on the outside, the passenger's door where we discussed the void that is there, and the blood that trails beside that void. That tells investigators a lot about what may have happened. There's the bloody handprints that were found on the outside of the car. We know that there was one on the driver's door, and there's always been rumblings that there was also a handprint found on the trunk of the vehicle. So if Buford said that neither of them got out of the Fury, then whose blood is it? Why is it there? That could tell investigators a great deal. When you compare the photographic evidence of blood locations inside the vehicle, as well as the autopsy report showing the nature of the wounds and blood type, that could tell us a great deal about where bodies were in the vehicle, what position that they were in. It's simple to do just from blood typing. And I'm sure that they know both Buford and Pauline's blood types. The photographic evidence could also help investigators determine measurements inside the vehicle. For instance, from the way that Buford described falling into the floorboard after being shot, was that even possible? Again, when you compare the blood evidence and autopsy reports and compare that with the photographic evidence, it might tell you if it was possible or impossible for Buford to have been in the floorboard as he claimed. There is all this and so much more that gets into things that most of us wouldn't understand. Forensic technology and photographic technology is so different now than it was 57 years ago. Another thing I would think that Mark Davidson might be asking about is the route that Buford took that morning. It was back roads. Much of it was unimproved, just dirt, gravel. Why did he avoid populated areas? He had to cross over two paved highways that would have taken him to Highway 45, and he could have gone straight down from there. But no, he continued all the way over to New Hope Road, which at that time was a fairly isolated part of the country. The highway route would have been much faster than this convoluted route that Buford decided to take. And you have to wonder about how the ambush party knew that he would be going that way. That makes absolutely no sense. Most people would have thought that he would have gone down Highway 64 and 45, especially if they knew anything about his driving habits, because, like we all know, Buford was lead-footed. And to go this back route the way he did, even though it's a shorter route, only about 17 and a half, 18 miles maybe from his home there in Adamsville, the connection between Highway 64, which was just 2 blocks from his house, and Highway 45 in Selmer, even though it was a few miles longer, he could have traveled it a whole lot faster. So it appears to a lot of us, and hopefully District Attorney General Mark Davidson will see it that way, that Buford was avoiding any populated areas. Beyond the route, I'm sure that District Attorney General Mark Davidson will probably review the reconstruction of the alleged pursuit of Buford's car by a Cadillac. Now, I'm fairly certain that the TBI would have done such a reconstruction of that pursuit. Buford told Warren Jones and Jim Moffitt that he and Pauline passed the church somewhere around 4:45 a.m. and that when they got down to the little bridge, the first ambush site, this Cadillac roared up beside him, turned on his headlights. A couple of gunshots rang out, one striking Pauline in the head, but according to Buford, that only wounded her. Now, when you're doing a reconstruction, there's a lot of things you have to take into consideration. Well, let's talk about that for a moment. He goes by at 45, 50 miles an hour. They're at a dead stop. They have to take off after him. The street or the road had just been resurfaced the day before. It wasn't blacktop back then. It was just oil and chert being a gravel. Now, here they are trying to do this in the dark. They're accelerating. They've got a curve that comes up just shortly after you leave the parking lot there at the church that they would have to negotiate. And if they were going any speed at all, they would have careened right off the roadway because of that fresh gravel under their tires. They would have been out in the woods. So, I've never bought Buford's story that they chased him down in the darkness. Now, you saw where I attempted to do something similar when the road was blacktop. I had to turn my park lights on just to see the stripe in the middle of the roadway, which wasn't there in 1967. And still, the top speed that I got up to was like 32 miles an hour. Beyond that, you had absolutely no clue what was coming up next. Now, hopefully, D.A. Davidson will take into consideration the value of a reconstruction of the ambush. These days, reconstruction is generally done with computer software. By this, I mean they will scan in a car and input information about the vehicle as well as the route that was taken in this case, and the computer software will visually reconstruct that pursuit. Hopefully, District Attorney Davidson will take a look at this, consider it, and be able to determine whether or not he believes that Buford was telling the truth about being chased down by that Cadillac without the use of its headlights. There's all this and so much more that I haven't been able to touch because of time restraints. But what I am saying is I hope D.A. Davidson considers all the information, everything I've covered, or at least I think that they will have in that file, and anything else that happens to be there, and make the correct decision accordingly. Now, we're up against the clock. It's almost time to go, and so I wanted to say thank you to the silver-throated Brian McCall. And Brian, have a good weekend.
You're welcome, Mike. Have a great weekend and say hello to Miss Connie for me.
And that will close by just saying what I always say. Truth has no agenda. And thanks for being here.